And welcome back to another episode of the Chili Wolf Pack Podcast, Worship Wednesday edition. I am your host, Ian Wolf. Today we'll be reading from the book of Ecclesiastes. Once again, the wisdom of King Solomon. We're back in the Old Testament. Ecclesiastes chapter 10. And the title of chapter 10 in the CSB version is The Burden of Folly, or in other words, foolishness. So, in today's episode, we'll be discussing wisdom and foolishness through a lot of personification and parables. Let's get into it. Ecclesiastes chapter 10. Dead flies make a perfumer's oil ferment and stink, so a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. Let's stop right there after verse 1. Dead flies inside perfume. You have this nice perfume. It's valuable. It's rich, it smells good, but when you put dead flies inside of it, or when dead flies find their way on the inside, it totally devalues this rich perfume. It stinks. Who wants to use it? And it compares that to a little folly, or a little bit of foolishness outweighs wisdom and honor. So, take a person who in many ways is very wise, but a little bit of foolishness outweighs it. Like a little bit of the bad outweighs the good. Oftentimes, it's easier to remember the bad about someone than it is the good. Let's move on. Verse 2. A wise person's heart goes to the right, but a fool's heart to the left. Even when the fool walks along the road, his heart lacks sense. Ancient context here I'd like to touch on in verse 2. The word right in the ancient world meant skillful, and the word left connotated ineptness and clumsiness. So if we were to reread that knowing this now, this is saying a wise person's heart goes to skillfulness, and a fool's heart goes to ineptness and clumsiness. Verse 4. If the ruler's anger rises against you, do not leave your post, for calmness puts great offenses to rest. That is huge. And that is currently a skill that I am personally working on, is being the fire extinguisher instead of the fire. So when fire comes my way, aka someone else's anger, someone else's foolishness, someone else's manipulation, someone else's hate, someone else's just annoying behavior, rather than firing back like my flesh wants to, something I've been in a lot of prayer about, seeking counsel about, and actively working on, is being the fire extinguisher instead of just firing right back. Because when someone tries to disrespect me and it's not justified, obviously that's not going to sit well with me. How dare you disrespect me when I am not deserving of it? I've been nothing but kind to you, nothing but polite to you, been helping you out, whatever. Maybe I haven't been gossiping about you, but you've been gossiping about me. Like, how dare you do me dirty like that? Obviously, I'm fired up. I'm ticked off about it. But it's okay to be teed off about it. But your reaction has to be the fire extinguisher and not fire. Little baby said it best. You can't fight fire with fire. Moving on. Verse 5. There is an evil I have seen under the sun, an error proceeding from the presence of the ruler. The fool is appointed to great heights, but the rich man remain in lowly positions. I have seen slaves on horses, but princes walking on the ground like slaves. So that was verses 5 through 7 there, that last chunk that we just read. Now, let's touch on verse 6. The fool is appointed to great heights, but the rich remain in lowly positions. So this we can see here in politics, right? So the context here of verse 6 is saying that inadequate people who lack wisdom or skill could be put into elevated positions, whereas the adequate people, the ones who have wisdom and skill, the right people for the job, the competent ones, remain in the lowly positions. Do we see that in our world today? Do we see that? Do we see, and this is on both sides of the spectrum. If we're gonna, I'm not getting political, I'm getting real. This happens on both sides of the spectrum, guys, and anywhere in between. There are inadequate people in, as our politicians. But you might look around and you might have a family member. You might have a coworker. You might know someone on social media. You might know hundreds, if not thousands of other people who would make a better politician, who would make a better leader, who would help form a healthier governing body that would serve the people better, right? There's plenty of competent people who are working average Joe jobs. So how does it work? How do we get, quote unquote, fools appointed to great heights, but rich, the rich in the mind, the rich in the spirit, in the lower positions? There could be firefighters and plumbers and teachers and so on who'd be a better mayor, who'd be a better House of Representative, who'd be a better president. Why is this? I don't have answers for it, but this is in Ecclesiastes here. Let's move on to verse 8. The one who digs a pit may fall into it, and the one who breaks through a wall may be bitten by a snake. The one who quarries stones may be hurt by them. The one who splits logs may be endangered by them. That was just verses 8 through 9. Let's talk about this here. So in verse 8, it gives two different examples of people who are doing something sinful. In verse 8, the one who is digging a pit. This implies someone, the translation here says, this implies someone who is digging a pit for someone else to fall into. This person is trying to trap someone else, make someone else stumble. And it says that person will fall into it, or it says that person may fall into it. Then it's followed up in verse 8. It says, and the one who breaks through a wall may be bitten by a snake. And this implies someone who may be trying to plunder or break into a house. Excuse me. And it says that person may be bitten by a snake. So those two examples of someone doing wrong, trying to get someone to stumble or trying to steal, hurt someone else, that could backfire on them. The person digging a pit, they could fall right into the trap that they set. However, in verse 9, on the contrast here, it gives two examples of people doing honest work, but also potentially getting hurt. The one who quarries stones may be hurt by them. The one who splits logs may be endangered by them. So here, these are two examples of someone doing hard, honest labor, hard, honest work. But they could still potentially get hurt. Just like the two examples in verse 8 of the very sinful actions and them getting hurt. So why am I saying this? Why is King Solomon saying this? What's the point of all this? Let me find the translation here. So in my notes, it says that criminal activity can destroy you, but so can honest work. The teacher did not intend to discourage honesty, but to say, we have no guarantee of safety in this life. Even wise behavior can end in disaster. Ultimately, we must trust in wisdom. We must not trust in wisdom or in ethical behavior, but in God for our security. So I'm going to repeat that again, but break it down bit by bit. So again, verse 8 and verse 9, two polar opposite examples. People walking in sin, people doing hard, honest work. Nonetheless, it says there's still a chance that they could be hurt. They could be injured. Why? And this is a good reflection of you can't just rely on being a good person and good acts for your security. You can't trust in anything of this world. The only thing that you should put your trust in is the Lord. Let's take someone like Charlie Kirk, for instance. This is relevant. Okay. Was he perfect? No. Who is? I'm not. I'm trying to preach to you. You're not. You do great things, I'm sure. None of us are perfect. But Charlie Kirk vouched for a life of faith, family, good ethics and morals, equal rights, so on and so forth. And he was murdered. He was murdered. And we've seen this with other people too. Martin Luther King Jr. was also murdered. There are other examples that we could touch on too. People who vouched for godly things. People who lived their life in a very God-pleasing way. And they weren't safe. They were still killed. So that just goes to show that you can be moral, you can be ethical, but that doesn't guarantee your safety. So don't trust in anything besides the Lord. Let's move on to verse 10. If the axe is dull and one does not sharpen its edge, then one must exert more strength. However, the advantage of wisdom is that it brings success. If you have an axe and you're trying to chop down a tree or split logs, and you notice, man, this is kind of hard. You take a look at the axe and you realize, oh, wow, the blade's dull. I'm going to sharpen it. And then you sharpen the blade of the axe, and then you start splitting the logs much easier. You exert less force per hit. It takes less hits to split the log. That is wise right there, because you noticed that there was a problem, and then you took the initiative to relieve yourself of the problems. It makes your work more efficient. You're not exerting as much physical energy. But on the other hand, if you're swinging and swinging and swinging with the axe, you have a dull blade, but you keep swinging and swinging and swinging, and you don't do anything about it. You don't sharpen the blade. Well, is that a wise thing or is that a foolish thing? Right? You keep repeating the same mistake over and over and over again. So be wise and be the person who notices that your blade is dull and then sharpen its edge. Moving on to verse 11. If the snake bites before it is charmed, then there is no advantage for the charmer. The words from the mouth of a wise person are gracious, but the lips of a fool consume him. The beginning of the words from his mouth is folly, but the end of his speaking is evil madness. Yet the fool multiplies words. No one knows what will happen, and who can tell anyone what will happen after him? The struggles of fools weary them, for they don't know how to go to the city. Let's touch on notes and translations here. It says, the primary service of a counselor was giving advice to a king, and the quality of the counselor's advice marked the counselor as either a sage or a fool. The mark or the tell of a foolish counselor is that he says far more than he knows. He tries to overcompensate for his lack of knowledge by just continuing to talk and talk and talk. However, the wise counselor oftentimes will say less, and he will admit when he just doesn't know. So the foolish counselor, even if they don't really know the wisest way, they'll keep talking and act like they know the wisest way. Whereas the wise man, they'll admit, hey, I don't have an answer for you right now. You ever heard the saying, I don't know if it's specifically in the Bible, but the saying that sometimes the smartest person is the quietest one in the room. And that may not always be the case. Like, I'm sure there are some very intelligent people who will talk your ear off, for sure. But you kind of know what I'm saying there. Verse 16, woe to you, land, when your king is a youth and your princes feast in the morning. Blessed are you, land, when your king is a son of nobles and your princes feast at the proper time. What does this mean? These verses conclude the general discussion on wisdom in the political world with the remark that few things matter so much in this area as leadership. So these verses are advocating for leadership, right? Blessed are you when your king is a son of nobles and your princes feast at the proper time, right? Right time, right place. Verse 18, because of laziness, the roof caves in, and because of negligent hands, the house leaks. Let me reread that. Verse 18, because of laziness, the roof caves in, and because of negligent hands, the house leaks. A feast is prepared for laughter, and wine makes life happy, and money is the answer for everything. Do not curse the king even in your thoughts, and do not curse a rich person even in your bedroom. For a bird of the sky may carry the message, and a winged creature may report the matter. Verse 20, obviously there's some bizarre examples, and that is not to be taken literally. Obviously, a bird may carry the message, a winged creature may report the matter. Like, okay, it's kind of makes it sound like dragons are snitching on you or something. That's not to be taken literally, but let's dive into that. First, let's get into verse 19, because there is something in verse 19 that I'm a little confused about myself. I'm going to be honest. I'm preaching to you, and I don't have all the answers here, and I pray to God that the Lord will provide the wisdom at the right time, but it may not be on this episode. So, verse 19, the very last part of it says, "And money is the answer for everything," but many, many times. I have notes on verse on this. Um, let's look here. So it says, first, we must do the work needed to ensure that we have the basic comforts that all people desire. So that's referring to verse 18. Laziness, the roof caves in, and negligent hands, the house leaks.